Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. Just want to make sure I allow everyone some opportunity to get logged in and settled in. Hopefully you've grabbed your lunch and can sit back and relax and engage with us for the next hour. All right, looks like our logins have slowed down some, so I will be, in the interest of time, I will make sure we get kicked off here. Hello, everyone. I am Trisha Kitzman. You are joining us today to talk about making it okay to talk about mental illness, not only individually to stop and end stigma, but also ways that we may be able to look at ending it within the workplace. So welcome. I'm Trisha Kitzman. I am a program coordinator with the Institute for Public Health Practice at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. Just a couple housekeeping things. This is in a Zoom webinar format, so please feel free to ask any questions, raise your hand, or put questions in the Q&A. This will be interactive. We'll have some opportunities to engage. Your cameras are off automatically, but feel free again to raise your hand. We can unmute you. We will be able to engage you throughout the presentation today. If you have any technical difficulty, feel free to reach out to myself or Tasmin. We will be able to kind of pivot and help you through any type of technical issues you may be having. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to know who you are, where you're from, and where you work. So if you could go ahead and add that in the chat, it would be great to see where folks are logging in from. Without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Brianna and let her introduce herself and kick us off for our Lunch and Learn today. Brianna, thanks again for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Brianna Sink, and I work for the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative. And I just started as their Make It Okay coordinator. So I'm excited to be here with you guys today. So thank you for having me. Just a quick, I think you already mentioned, Trisha, we're going to have some interactiveness today. So there will be some polling in here. I encourage everyone to feel free to come off mute and throw out questions, throw it in the chat. We'll have some discussions throughout this next hour or so. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand. All right. Make It Okay is a campaign of the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative. We are a nonprofit organization which launched in 2011. Our mission is to create awareness and integrate solutions to improve the physical, social, and mental well-being of Iowans. In addition to our Make It Okay campaign, the Healthiest State also manages 3 other statewide initiatives, starting with Double Up Food Bucks, 5210 Healthy Choices Count, and Iowa Produce Prescription. And I would be remiss if I did not give an awesome shout out to our sponsors who make our work possible. So thank you. Quick overview. In this presentation, we will talk about what is Make It Okay. We'll learn more about stigma, what it is, how it shows up around mental health and illness, its impact on individuals, caregivers, and families, and the community as a whole. We'll talk about the interconnectedness between mental health and mental illness. Not having a mental illness does not necessarily guarantee good mental health or vice versa. We'll talk about tips for supporting and talking. We'll go through some resources for you to implement into your workplace and just for general support. And we'll also go through how more you can get involved. Make It Okay, in simple terms, is a community campaign to reduce stigma by increasing understanding and creating caring conversations about mental illness. It's meant to be simple and a starting point for everyone. This 3-prong approach, learn, talk, and share, guides us on how we can start changing attitudes and reducing stigma of mental illnesses. By learning more about stigma, its impact and why it matters, the myths, misconceptions, and facts around mental health and mental illnesses. to talk, providing tips on how to talk more openly and compassionately about mental illness and help you feel more comfortable with what to say, what not to say, and how to engage in caring and informed conversations. And last, sharing the message of hope and what you can do to make it okay. If you leave here with nothing else today, these are just some of the key facts that we would like you to take with you. These messages are woven throughout our entire Make It Okay campaign. Mental illnesses are common, treatable health conditions, which can be effectively treated and managed with an individualized health plan. Everyone has a state of mental health. We all have good days, we have bad days, some in between days, regardless if you have a mental illness. Stigma impacts everyone at the individual and community level and creates shame, isolation. We can stop stigma by learning the facts and talking more openly. And it is never too late or too early for someone to ask for help. As I mentioned before, Make It Okay was initially launched in Minnesota in 2012 after they heard from patients, families, and community members that stigma was a real problem. The Iowa Healthiest State Initiative adopted this in 2019, unknowingly before a pandemic, and great, we did right before then. So that's a little bit about us. Next, we're going to dive deeper into some of the content. We're going to start with a brief video. So hopefully you can hear it. Please let me know if you can't.
Thank you. Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
good. So, how was your weekend?
It's good. How about you?
Yeah.
Meh. What's that? What does meh mean?
Well, with depression, some days are good days and some days are bad days. And yesterday was not one of my good days.
Silence. It makes the mental illness stigma even worse.
You want to talk about it?
Learn what to say at makeitokay.org.
So as you can see, the big empty talk bubble, silence makes stigma worse. When I first saw that, it was an instant, like, I've been there. I feel like I can speak for a lot of us of we've been in that situation. It's uncomfortable. So silence can make people feel alone, uncomfortable, and prevent them from sharing about their mental illness, which can lead to isolation, shame, feeling disconnected. So start by saying something. By starting a conversation, people feel heard and know that somebody cares. And it's normal to get tongue-tied. That's why we're here, and that's what we're going to help you with today. And we'll go through to help stop the silence and engage in caring conversations. So understanding stigma exists, and that's why Make It Okay exists, and that's why we're here. Stigma of mental illness is a major barrier to seeking treatment, so our goal is to reduce the stigma of mental illness. By definition, stigma is a negative perception that causes someone to devalue or think less of the whole person. It is stereotyping or labeling a person because of their condition. Stigma of any kind is a negative mindset and provides no value to society in general, and ultimately boils down to discrimination, leaving people who have a mental illness or those who are caregivers feel that they are not as valued and are perceived as a burden or even dangerous. Stigma exists when it comes to mental illness, and that's why we're here, to use this time as an opportunity to reflect on how mental illnesses have been negatively portrayed and make a pact to do the best we can together and change our language, our thoughts, and attitudes about mental illness, and how we show up for those living with a mental illness. For today's discussion, I'd like to share our definition of mental health and illness. Mental health is a continuum of psychological well-being that all humans experience on a day-to-day basis. It affects how we think, feel, and act, how we handle stress, and relate to others. It is a state of well-being in which a person realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and contribute to their community. Mental illness is a diagnosable health condition involving changes in a person's thinking, feeling, behavior, or mood, or a combination. Such conditions may affect someone's ability to relate to others and function each day. It is important to distinguish that mental illness is a diagnosable health condition similar to a physical illness one may be diagnosed with. Okay, this is where I need some participation. So when thinking about or describing someone experiencing cancer, what are some of the first words that come to mind? You can throw in the chat box, you can come off mute, whatever you're comfortable with. Sadness, maybe warrior, fighter, extended illness, fighter, lonely, patient, brave, survivor. Yeah, often these words come quick to mind. They're typically supporting, they're kind, reassuring words, and rightfully deserved by those experiencing cancer. Now, let's do the same thing, but with the first word that comes to mind or that you've heard others use when it comes to describe someone with a mental illness. Anxious, bipolar, drama. Maybe, yep, crazy, withdrawn. Again, those words often come quick to mind, but may not feel as comfortable saying them because they are typically more negative or hurtful. So what's important is that people with mental illness are just as deserving as the words of warrior or fighter, brave. So why do you think there's such a difference in words used to describe these two illnesses? These negative words, images can be tracked back to stigma surrounding mental illnesses. A step in the right direction is to avoid using language such as, that person is crazy, or I'm so OCD about my desk. All relatable phrases that I'm sure we have all used at some point. We will know we are making progress when the same words and images used to describe someone experiencing cancer or another physical illness are the same words and images used to describe someone living with a mental illness. Research and public surveys have shown that people's knowledge of mental illness is rather limited, leading to beliefs and misconceptions around mental illnesses being due to stress, lack of willpower, weakness, attention seeking. The reality is that mental illnesses are medical health conditions, just like any physical medical condition, such as cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure. They are biological in nature. It's important that we quickly combat those stigmatized beliefs and give people the facts. You would never tell someone with cancer to just get over it or stop exaggerating. So why do you think those battling a mental illness, which affects their day-to-day living, just like those other medical conditions do? It's important to learn more because when people understand that the person is not to blame for the mental illness, they don't fault them. And when they better understand that it is a treatable condition, it begins to normalize the conversation and the reality of it. This is the reality. The reality of those living with a mental illness is found in this image. That person may be a celebrity, someone we look up to, relate to, or maybe it's a neighbor, a coworker, our loved one, ourselves. Mental illnesses affect every age, every race, every gender, every occupation, and it does not discriminate. And once we all better understand that, we can all better understand that it's okay to talk about mental illnesses because they are, in fact, so common. Okay, next we're going to do some polling questions. So let me make sure that I can start it really quick. Whoops. There we go. Can someone confirm that they can see the polling questions? Is it coming up as one? Okay, awesome. So go ahead and start answering. There is no right or wrong answer. So the first question is, have you or a loved one ever struggled with mental illness? Yes, no, unsure. So we often know our family history regarding physical illnesses, such as diabetes or cancer, but we might not know our family history on mental illness. So let's normalize talking about it at the dinner table. All right. Second question. I'm more comfortable helping a person who has a physical illness than I am helping a person who has a mental illness. Agree, neutral, or disagree? Some things to think about, why do we think it's harder to help someone with a mental illness? Maybe because I know for a fact when I was in school, we didn't really talk about mental illness and how to help those. We often talk about CPR, first aid. But back when I was in school, we didn't talk about what to do with a mental illness. So I think some of those questions to think about, I think that's changing, but something I never thought about. Third question. I would see myself as weak if I had a mental illness and could not fix it myself. Agree, neutral, disagree. And 4, people in my community are caring towards people with mental illnesses. A community can mean many things, such as your neighborhood, your family, your social network, your workspace, your faith community, geography. This is typically a common area where people often believe we still have work to do because they can strongly say their communities are still not as caring towards those with a mental illness. So these questions can help shed the light on the different lens of stigma in yourself, others, and communities, and help you start to think how you can show up a little bit differently in those areas. Thank you for participating. Okay. Oh. There we go. All right, I have another short video for you. So we'll hear from Daniel on how stigma has shown up and the impact it has.
So stigma is a big stumbling block when it comes to recovering from mental illness. Now, just as much as I was getting this diagnosis, my family and loved ones also were getting this because they were not experienced in living with someone that lives with mental illness. But there was sort of some stigma there. Like I said, I'm originally from Nigeria, and it's one of those cultures where mental illness is something that's not spoken about. It definitely occurs, but it's not spoken about. While they struggled with it, they just were very supportive. But I think where the stigma was glaring and scary was in the community and even amongst friends. I've lost a number of friends after my diagnosis of mental illness.
This subject is not a popular subject in the African American community, Dan, because labeling, for instance, and stereotyping. What have you discovered about that?
Yeah, I think the key word there that I pick up on is stereotype. And, I think, a lot of communities, but especially in the African American community, there's a stereotype of what a man is supposed to be or what a woman, a mother is supposed to be.
All right. So how does stigma show up in your communities or workplaces? Feel free to throw your answer in the chat, come off mute, whichever you're comfortable with. Or what steps do you see your communities taking to combat stigma? There's no wrong answer, I promise.
Brianna, you want to repeat the question one more time?
Absolutely. How does stigma show up in your communities or workplaces? Or what steps do you see your communities taking to combat stigma? Perhaps in a workplace, it could be a wellness room that they have. Thank you. Happy to see our county treating mental health and being aware. There's still always work to be done. Concerned with taking time off for mental well-being? Absolutely. Our local mental health outpatient organization is growing with support from the community. That's awesome. Here in Humboldt, they are currently building a mental health department space in the hospital. Webinars such as these. Awesome. Thank you. This slide is a great standalone to have in the workplace if you need resources. It goes through why stigma matters, how stopping stigma can create more caring communities, and what each person can do right now to help end stigma. We often say not talking about a mental illness would be the same not talking to someone who is living with cancer or their diabetes or any other illness about their illness, or expecting them to deal with it alone. When people do not feel that they are able to reach out to even the closest people in their lives, it can lead to feelings of isolation, shame, poor health. There's so much that each of us can do to help change this narrative and stop the silence and end the stigma, including recognizing that mental illness is a disease, using respectful language when talking about mental illness, and seeing the person for who they are and not the condition. So I think a great focus is in that blue column on what you can do. It is so important that we make it okay to not be okay to have a mental illness, because many of us do. How common? 1 in 5 people will experience a mental illness at some point in their life. That's as common as white cars. So you'll be looking at your parking lot a little bit differently. Putting this into more perspective, it is more common than people with diabetes, which is about 1 in 10. And yet how we talk about these two conditions is very different. Why? Because stigma makes it harder for people to talk about a mental illness. This is why learning, talking, and sharing is so important. It helps stop the stigma. So let's get comfortable about talking about different types of mental illnesses. On the screen is just a very small handful of the different types. But part of learning more is understanding that there are many different mental illnesses. We don't talk about physical illnesses under one umbrella. We call them out: diabetes, cancer, heart disease. When you know more about the different mental illnesses, you can start to show up a little bit more informed and in a caring and understanding way. Mental illnesses are diagnosed by a provider, just like a physical one. With any illness, they fall along a continuum and are more severe or mild than others. It's important to understand that our brains and bodies are connected, so symptoms can show up in different ways. People express them emotionally when talking with you, or they can come out through physical symptoms. Make It Okay is not intended to diagnose or treat mental illnesses, but it's just good to know that these are a handful of symptoms that are associated with various diagnoses. This is not an exclusive list or an exhaustive list. Symptoms can be different from person to person, so get familiar with these symptoms so you can recognize them and be more aware, starting a conversation when they do arise. These symptoms can be different from other illnesses in that we can't detect them from a blood test or a lump in the skin. Calling to why it's important that we start having that conversation and encourage people to seek help and talk with a provider about their symptoms. This is a little bit easier to do with someone you're close with, so you understand their personality a little bit better, or a coworker you see every day. But these are just a couple of those common symptoms to look for. So as discussed earlier, mental illnesses are on a continuum from mild to none to moderate or severe, and they are diagnosable health conditions. Everyone has a state of mental health. It can be good or poor or somewhere in between. Mental health can vary or change at different ages, in different phases and changes of life. For example, grief and loss, relationship changes, divorce, work stress. Not having a mental illness does not guarantee good mental health. Similarly, having a mental illness does not guarantee poor mental health. Experiencing good mental health may look like having a strong support system, life satisfaction and purpose, feeling connected, a sense of belonging, positive identity, a home, employment, sense of empowerment and resiliency. Poor mental health may look like feeling socially isolated, disempowered, no sense of purpose. You might have high stress situations like poor housing, poverty, unemployment, divorce, loss. So let's walk through a few examples to better understand this. So first, let me introduce Maya. As you can see, she has optimal mental health, but lives with the diagnosed mental illness, depression. Maya is flourishing. She finds that she feels best when she stays connected to others, goes on daily hikes and journals. She makes self-care a priority. Next, we have Leo. He has poor mental health, but no mental illness diagnosis. Leo's feeling stressed and anxious and lacking a sense of purpose at work. He's stuck and not sure what to do to feel better. This is a good example of people who do not have a mental illness diagnosis, but experiencing poor mental health. This is Kim. Kim has poor mental health and a mental illness diagnosis. Kim is battling an eating disorder. She is feeling isolated and overwhelmed and does not know who to turn to or where to call to get help or treatment. The messages to send to Kim would be to reassure her that treatments are available, and talking with someone who is an expert will help. Being a support system for her, helping her to find treatment, and letting her know that you are there for her. And last, this is James. James has optimal mental health, but lives with a mental illness diagnosis. James has bipolar disorder, but is managing it with therapy, medication, and self-care. He is thriving. He has a lot of social support and stays active. He manages his mental illness, but he knows that does not mean it goes away, but he's doing good and has found a treatment plan that works for him and his overall mental health. The problem with stigma is that it leads people to believe that everyone with a mental illness is in the same situation as Kim, who has a poor mental health and poor management of her mental illness. But you can clearly see that this is not the case. It's okay to have mental illness because they are treatable and recovery is possible. A treatment plan will look different from person to person, but they can be a combination of these. It does not mean symptoms will completely go away, but can help manage and reduce the impact of symptoms. And the sooner people get treatment, the greater the chances of recovery. Combating stigma through Learn, Talk, and Share will aid in people seeking treatment and sooner. It's important to call out that taking a medication for a mental illness is not a sign of failure. Some illnesses require medication as best practice for treatment and for a high quality of life. Again, just like diabetes or high blood pressure, they have medications to help them live their best life. So same goes with the mental illness. So to help make it okay, we all need to start showing up a little bit differently. We need to be supportive. And how do we do that? We need to stop the silence surrounding mental illness. Silence can be deafening when someone reaches out for help and they are met with silence or no response. Silence is not the answer. Be nice. We shouldn't have to have this on this slide, but people with mental illness have told us yes. Unfortunately, we need to leave it on. Continue to remind people kindness, empathy, compassion, and understanding go a long way with people. Be kind, be nice. Really listen, not with the intent to speak or judge, but rather listening to understand. Keep in contact. It can be difficult for someone experiencing a mental illness to pick up the phone or write a text, so persistence can be important. Be the one to call or text first. It might not be balanced back and forth, but it's important that you continuously reach out. Don't ignore it. Offer to help. Ask them, what can I do to help? It might be helping with the kids, driving them to an appointment. I always say in the Midwest, we're kind of the casserole region. Drop off dinner. Keep the conversation going. Mental illness is a part of them. It's not all of them. So ask them how they're doing, but then move on. Talk about other parts of their life too. Offer to connect with them to resources or to engage in self-care together. If it's a neighbor, maybe offer to go for a quick walk around the block with them each day, and it'll help you too with your own self-care. So this is actually one of our most visited pages on our website and very impactful. So what we say and don't say can often make a big difference in helping to support someone living with a mental illness. It offers positive and helpful language to negative phrases that are not helpful when talking with an individual that is experiencing a mental illness. We try to avoid using derogatory phrases in general, like crazy, psycho, insane, nuts. These words help perpetuate the stigma, and it is amazing how those words are used on a day-to-day basis. I often catch myself every once in a while, and I'm like, okay, if I tallied every time I refer to something as crazy, when it's not actually crazy. My goodness, that tally marks much longer than I like to admit. Saying things like we've all been there or everyone feels that way, it takes away from that person's what they're feeling. And if you have never suffered from severe depression, for example, you have not been there. Saying these types of phrases minimizes their emotions. Better statements are, thanks for opening up to me. Can I drive you to an appointment? Can I cook you a meal? The key to remember is to not dismiss their illness and to be there for them. All this can be done through talking. If nothing else, if you don't know what to say, think about what you would say to someone who just told you they have a physical illness, like diabetes or cancer. Say that. Oftentimes you can go back to, well, what's your treatment plan look like? Do you have to see a special doctor for that? Are you on certain medications? Those are a little bit easier to come up with than, well, what you're typically used to. Now I have another short video to help with helpful language. We'll hear from Sherry.
My first hospitalization and treatment, I told just my supervisor. I didn't tell the leadership team that was around me. And that was difficult because I knew I was hiding something, and it didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel comfortable leaving, being gone, or coming back. And so the second time that I went in for hospitalization and then day treatment, I told the leadership team, and I was nervous, very nervous about doing that. And I was very fortunate that the team was very supportive. And the way that they did that was that they normalized it for me. They didn't act afraid. They didn't act as if they didn't know what to do with me. They very much just said, we wish you well. We understand you'll be out, and we will help cover in whatever way that we can. And then with coworkers, I think it was very helpful when they would just check in every once in a while and just say, how are you doing today? And just that simple small bit makes a big difference, because it just acknowledges that maybe things might not be going that great that day and that it's a struggle.
Okay, now that we've learned about stigma, helpful language to use, it's a little harder since we're in a big group, but just think maybe to yourself, well, we can always come back as a group too, but let's practice. A close friend comes over and says they have not been feeling well lately. They say they have been diagnosed with anxiety, and sometimes it feels like their heart is pounding so hard that they feel like they are having a heart attack. What do you say? Feel free to put your response in the chat or come off mute.
Yeah, you can also raise your hand if you'd like to share, and we can unmute you. So feel free, the Q&A, the chat, or raise your hand, and we'd be more than happy to unmute you so you can share what you would say.
Have you talked to your mental health provider about this? Good. Have you shared this with your doctor? Maybe they can provide you with strategies that might help when this happens. Awesome. That sounds very scary. Were we able to get any medications to help with those feelings? Those are all great.
We have one in the Q&A. Sorry to hear that. Have they suggested any medicine or treatment tools?
That's great. Thank you. All great responses. So once we get past staying silent, the next step is to be able to help provide resources to people. And this is a great place to start. Talking with your primary care doctor is a great first step. They are equipped to listen to and treat those that are experiencing mental illnesses. If people aren't sure where to look for help, calling health insurance plans is a great first step. If your workplace has an EAP or an employee assistant program, that's a great place to connect with and explore all options available to you. We have heard that this one is actually, although it's a very important resource, it is often very underutilized. So make sure people know about it in your workplace if you have one. A trusted community or faith leader may also be a great person to encourage as a first step. So there are a few resources you can take action on today. This map is actually located on our website under our Make It Okay page. It shows how many ambassadors that we have registered throughout the county. So all the green ones are where we have registered ambassadors, and I'll touch on ambassadors in a moment. We also have the same map that has registered workplaces. So you can register your workplace and receive a toolkit on how to implement Make It Okay into your workplace. These tools have already been created, and we have many, many resources within those toolkits that we've created. And so please beg, borrow, and steal anything you see on our website in the toolkit. We encourage it. And if there's something that's missing, please let us know. We're more than happy to create something. It's easier to create stuff that we know people will use rather than creating things that don't get used. So if you have ideas, please let us know. We're always happy to help. Some ideas that some current workplaces have done to implement Make It Okay in their workplace. Promote the Make It Okay Ambassador training to their employees. So the Make It Okay Ambassador training is a 2-hour version of this presentation, kind of. It goes through the presentation, but also how to present it. And then you're given kind of a bag of tools to kind of take into your own personal life, whether you want to present this formally, informally. We have a store that you can purchase promotional items such as buttons, bookmarks, those types of things. So you can, when you're grocery shopping, you have a button on your purse or your backpack or something. It's a conversation starter. Just so, get the conversation started. It's okay to not be okay, right? You can also have invite myself, Jamie Habrel is our executive director, who gives this presentation a lot as well. Or we could have an ambassador come and give a presentation for your workplace if you would like. So that's something that we do often. And then also sharing social media posts from our social media page. Easy, quick things. Again, they've already been created. So hopefully it's as super easy just to hit share, or even just send something out in your company newsletter that you send out, or on the company intranet if you have one of those. We have a lot of materials you can use to host and to share. A few other general resources that we have. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, has affiliates throughout the state and include additional training opportunities, but also support groups and other resources to support those living with a mental illness and or caregivers. They have a ton of resources and lots of different programs. So I encourage you to check them out. Make It Okay Iowa includes, like I said, free resources that you can beg, borrow, and use. This includes written as well as videos from Iowans' lived experiences. You can find those on our YouTube page, but also on our Make It Okay website. And then 988 actually just rolled out in July of 2022. And this is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So similar to 911, when you have a physical emergency, 988 is to be used during a mental emergency. And you can call, text, or chat, I believe, with that line. How to engage more with us, with Make It Okay. You can take the pledge. So on our website, it shows a commitment to learn, talk, and share, like we discussed. So learning more about mental illness, talking about it, creating caring conversations to end the stigma, and to share the Make It Okay message with others, and to share available resources. You can become an ambassador. It's an online 2-hour training. It is free. You can sign up by visiting our website on the events calendar. And then you can launch Make It Okay in your community or organization. Becoming a registered workplace, you can do so on our website. And I always like to throw in that May, I know it seems far away, is Mental Health Awareness Month. So if you want to get something kind of started or engage your workplace for May, I recommend it. We will be updating the calendar with all sorts of things during May. May 18th, I believe, is a Thursday, and that's Wear Green Day to promote mental health awareness. So we have t-shirts you can order. You can send us your picture of your whole staff wearing a green t-shirt or a Make It Okay t-shirts, put on social media, help with the awareness. So those types of things we have scheduled for May. But I recommend having a presentation get scheduled before May or during May would be a great opportunity. Okay, we've covered a lot and a great deal today regarding mental illness, the stigma surrounding it, what we can do to stop the silence. This is a tough topic to tackle, especially over lunch. So I encourage you to take some time today to unwind, take care of yourself. It's supposed to be like 60 degrees here in Des Moines today, so a nice walk outside is what's on my docket. Digest the information that you saw. In closing, I want to remind you that resources are available for those who want to learn more about mental illness and what you can do to help. So we're going to close on a quick video, and then if there's any questions at the end, I'm more than happy to stay on and answer them. So thank you.
A few years ago, I lost a job because of stigma. Stigma, it prevented me from getting employment. It prevented me from maintaining jobs.
I've lost a lot of good friends due to stigma.
Stigma made me hide my truth and who I really am.
It kept me feeling isolated and just resulted in more loneliness and more opportunity for the illness to continue rather than get better. Stigma for me made it very difficult to even access services when I first experienced mental illness.
Stigma has made me feel more alone and like I couldn't connect with anyone.
Thank you for taking this time to educate yourselves and learn more.
I appreciate anybody who opens their mind and heart to learning more about mental illness and taking the power away from stigma.
Without your help, we can't completely eradicate the discrimination that people living with mental illness and their family members experience.
I really want to thank you for taking an interest in this and doing this activity, and I hope that that will help others to experience less of that stigma. I really appreciate that you are taking the time to look within yourself and to think about how stigma does affect someone with a mental illness and how you can help be a part of a solution towards making it easier for someone to access the help that they need.
I really appreciate you taking the first step to end the stigma.
Thank you for reflecting on the impact of stigma.
I want to thank you for making it so that anyone else doesn't have to feel alone and that they know that someone cares for them.
Thank you, everyone.
So Brianna, thank you so